Welcome on this somewhat more challenging series that we're working on right now. Although I suspect we'll be back to Rashi for Chukat and Balak and stuff like that. So Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Okay, great. Thank you. And let me turn on the screen share. And hopefully you're going to see it in a moment. All right. So we are actually in the middle of a commentary on Vayishma Moshe. Moses heard and he fell on his face. And the question the Gemara asked was, what did he hear? What did he hear? Actually, and specifically Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yonatan that he heard that he was being held in suspicion of adultery. And we were in the middle of answering that particular question because Torah T'mimah said this isn't so clear, right? And he quoted a statement in the Sota, which says that basically someone who exalts himself or someone who acts arrogantly in the end will get entrapped in adultery, that's going to happen. And of course they accused Moses of exalting himself, etc., etc. So we were in the middle of this, and at the same time, it's still not so clear. So we were in the middle of this Torah T'mimah, the Eino Mevoar. He says, and it's not so clear. Tam hara'aya, the rationale from the proof given, mi pasuk u'Moshe yikach et ha'oel. So they used this verse to say, this was the actually end of it, right? In the quotation from the Gemara, right? How do we know this? Right? How do we know this? Well, it says in Psalm, right? Psalm 106, it says they were jealous of Moses in the encampment, but it doesn't necessarily tell you specifically what they were jealous of, what Korach and his associates were jealous of. And so that it went on to say in the Gemara, that every single individual was suspicious that Moses had relations with his wife. And then it goes on, here's the proof, right? Moses took the tent and he pitched it outside the encampment. Now, I'm going to give you Torah T'mimah, and I actually have a thought myself as to why that possibly works. But in the meantime, a Torah T'mimah is saying, what's the proof of that statement, right? So, mikach et ha'oil, etc. A4 merumaz, where is it suggested? Shekol echad kine et ishto mimenu, that every individual was suspicious that his wife had relations with Moses. V'yesh lomar, and maybe the answer is, this is his suggestion, the samich al sof hapasuk, that it's actually based on the end of the verse that wasn't quoted, v'haya kol mevakesh Hashem, where it says everyone who sought the Lord, yatsa el ha'ohel, would go out to the tent. Ubevadai halchu gam hanashim levakesh gam hein davar Hashem. And it's quite probable that the women too went to seek the word of Hashem. Ukamoshe katuv b'midrashim, and it says in midrashim, in these interpretations, dinashe hamidbar tzadkiyot or tzadkaniyot hayu, that the midrashim mention that the women, not the men, but the women of that generation that went through the wilderness were tzadkaniyot. They were righteous women. Ukedei laharimo, okay, and simply in order to murmur against him, kine kol echad et ishto, that every individual was suspicious of his wife, Keshehalcha el Moshe el ha'ohel, that when she would go out to Moses to talk to Moses at the tent, that's when he was wondering what hanky-panky was going on. Laharot ki chashud hu etzlam bazeh, because it shows that they were suspicious regarding this, mipnei geuto l'datam, because they felt he was being arrogant. He was an arrogant person, excuse me, kemavoar, as we've already explained. V'lachein lakach. Sorry, question.
Sorry. Yes, this is not where that narrative's going, but is it because of the golden calf? Is there a situation that were these women particularly devoted to seeking God?
No, I don't get that feeling. I get the feeling that when you're an observant person, you want to know what the halacha is. You want to know what you do. Hey, what happened was the milk jug got shook and a drop fell into the chicken soup. What do? Do you have to throw it out? Can you keep it, etc.? It's that kind of thing that I'm feeling here. They simply were going to consult him. They wanted to know what to do that was possible, that was the right thing to do. I mean, it presupposes a place where you can get, which is saying, and by the way, we're reading, of course, in Heschel about this, that the most important need we have is to serve God, to sense that our Creator requires our service, is giving us a sense of sanctity, being needed, special, etc. And so part of being a tzaddik is having that sense, not necessarily articulated in the way I just did, but feeling that your place here in this world is to serve, whether it's serving God and serving your fellow human being in the service of Hashem, that is part of the way in which you do it. So, yeah. I'm hoping that's okay with you. Judith, do you want to follow up at all? Okay, I'm gonna.
No, it just struck me that you said this was the generation in the wilderness, and
Yes.
in some sense, the women and the men in that generation are in somewhat different positions because of
They were. Remember, the women didn't want to give their jewelry. Remember,
Yes.
they did not want to worship the golden calf. Was that what you were referring to?
Yes, because
Okay, I'm
so
sorry.
that it's not it's not surprising that the women were going
Right.
to
Yes.
find out.
Right.
And and since the issue of projection, accusing others of things that
Right.
a neutral party would think
Yes.
is the one that's making the accusation is more likely to have done it than the one
Of course. Yeah, so true. Yes.
The men all thinking that their women may be betraying them with Moses. They can be saying, "Oh, Moses is making himself arrogant," but there isn't. There isn't a real basis for them believing that because Moses acted humbly, and B, the women were, they didn't bear the guilt that the men did in this regard.
Yep. So Moses was aware of this. Moses was aware that they suspected him of exalting himself, of being arrogant, and also of that they would. He was aware. He was a Talmudist. He knew all these things. Of course, the Talmud as such didn't exist, but at the time. But regardless, he understood these dynamics. So I'm going to go on. V'lachein lakach et ha'ohel, and for this reason, he took the tent, v'natalo michutz lamachaneh, and he pitched it outside of the camp. Why? Kedei sheyipol ha-chashad, so that suspicion would drop off. They wouldn't suspect him. The mistama, because we can understand, "Delo telechna yechidot elav," that these women, if they had to march all this distance out of the camp to go to the tent, and because they were righteous women, they weren't going to go by themselves to him. But ein ish, without their ish imahem, without their husbands with them. והנה אף כי הפסוק הזה אינו כתוב בפרשה זו, and even though this particular verse about pitching the tent outside is not written in this parsha about Korach, etc., michol makom, but nevertheless, darshu came, that is to say, the rabbis, right, interpreted in this way, to achshav b'maseh Korach, because now in this action of Korach, haya hadavar chen, this whole issue now gets raised, ba'et shehi yoshev, shahaya yoshev bo'holo, at the time when he was dwelling in his tent. Okay, so that's how the proof works according to Torah T'mimah. I'd like to suggest an alternative. May not be as good a proof, but it's something that occurs to me. And this is the point, is it's got to do with the language that's being used. And that is the whole idea of the word ohel is understood as a term for a woman and a wife. And that it's possible that it's simply the language being used by the Torah here, that this whole idea of ohel and somehow thinking, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Okay, one moment, please. I'm going to pause this. Sorry, I'm going to pause the, sorry, I need to pause the share. Hold on. Okay, gonna mute. On with that. Okay, so I'm just wondering if the reason the Gemara is quoting that particular statement is just this whole issue of ohel and pitching the ohel and possibly saying that it was understood in this sort of euphemistic way. So not as good, obviously, or scholarly as Torah T'mimah, but there we go. All right, let's go on. Yes, David.
Yeah. So, a quick question, just out of curiosity, is this the reason or part of the reason that the Orthodox have, all the very strict, I'll say, customs, for in terms of men, women,
Yes.
how you treat a man's wife, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about. So,
yes, I do. Yes, the laws of modesty. Okay.
Yeah, and is this where it comes from as a result of this whole incident creates those laws that are followed, or is that came from somewhere else?
So I think it is simply part of the culture that there's a great sense of the necessity to act in a modest way. And the 60s were a time where basically the sexual mores were changed in our society, at least in the United States, but perhaps generally even in Western society. I think there's always been a recognition that part of human nature is that men and women are sexually driven. It's necessary for procreation, but at the same time, that when a man and a woman are alone together for any length of time, one might be suspicious that something is going on. that would not be proper, and partially because there was such a sense of how inappropriate that behavior was. The whole notion of casual sex, which is something that is very much a part of our present culture, to quite a great extent, I think there was an awareness that it could take place, that in fact, that in many ways it might well have taken place, but there was also a general sense that it was inappropriate, and in fact could really create huge societal problems, especially if someone got pregnant. And then there was a question of who the father was, etc., etc., etc. And so I think that these ideas of, on the one hand, trying to prevent situations where people might wind up together, where a man, especially a man and a woman, that's where it tended to happen, where a man and a woman would be by themselves together and sequestered in any kind of way, that something actually might happen. But there also was a sense that in those situations, even if it's perfectly innocent, people become suspicious. And they might accuse someone falsely or accuse these people falsely of engaging in promiscuity. And so there were all these attempts, I think, to put into halacha the need to act in a modest kind of way. I don't think it. So to answer your main question was, I think it's sort of in a way, perhaps putting the cart before the horse, which is this particular interpretation was out there as a possibility, and that Torah T'mimah is knowing the background to all this kind of stuff, that he's able to come up with these explanations that he has. But I believe the laws of modesty have basically been out there, and we know that they transcend society. Many societies have such laws. I mean, we know about ski slopes where only men are allowed to, that whole thing. I don't think Judaism goes that far. In fact, I'm pretty certain they don't. Okay. But yeah, go ahead, David.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. So makes sense.
Okay, cool. All right, onwards. Vaidaber el Korach. So this is Moses spoke to Korach, the el kol adator, and his entire congregation, lemor, saying, Boker, tomorrow morning, vayoda Hashem et asher lo, God, Hashem, will make known that the one who is his, ve'et hakadosh, and the one who is sanctified, once vehikriv elav, and draw him close to him. Ve'et asher yivcharbo, and the one whom he chooses, yakriv, yakriv elav, he will draw close to himself. And here's how we're going to do it. Moses is telling them. So the next comment is until and let's see, I think it's, take a look. The next comment on Torah T'mimah isn't until verse 7. So we're going to keep going here. Zot asu, do this. Kachu lachem machtot, take for yourselves fire pans. Korach, v'chol adato, and his entire congregation. Utnu vahem esh, and place fire in these fire pans. V'simu alehem ketoret, and place incense on them. Lifnei Hashem machar, before Hashem tomorrow. V'haya ha'ish asher yivchar Hashem, and the man, the individual whom Hashem chooses, hu hakadosh. We're going to say that's the one who is sanctified. Rav lachem b'nei Levi. It is too much for yourselves, or it means you have enough, as you'll see, O sons of Levi. So it could mean either, right? It could mean you are taking on too much on yourselves, okay? Or it can mean you have already, there is so much you have already, sons of Levi. So here we are. Rav lachem b'nei Levi. Too much, or there is much to you, O sons of Levi. Tanya, there is a rabbinic source, an early rabbinic source. This is predating the Talmud. Amar Rabbi Levi, said Rabbi Levi, Rav, using the word Rav, Biser, that is, Moses predicted to them, Rav Basruhu, and through this term Rav, Moses himself was also foretold, or he was told, etc., in some way. So what are we talking about? Rav Biser, he himself told the Korach, right, with this term Rav, and he said Rav Lachem, right? We just read it in the verse. You have already so much, all right? Barav Basruhu, or there's too much, you're taking on too much. Barav Basruhu, and in the term Rav, he himself, Moses, was also told, Dichtiv, as it says in Parshat Va'etchanan in Deuteronomy, Vayomer Hashem Eli, Moses is sharing with the Israelites, Hashem said to me, Rav Lacha, it's enough to you. Okay. So again, we are going to take a look at what he is saying. So, and obviously we're not going to be able to get through all of this at all. Hamafarshim, the people who commented, the commentators, he'erichu, they went to great lengths, leva'er tam hashayachut, the rationale for this connection, right? Umida keneged midah. And in what sense was it quid pro quo? In what sense was Moses being paid back? Was it payback time for Moses? Sheheshivu Hashem Rav Lacha, that God would have said to Moses, you're asking too much. This is when Moses was asking, in other words, Al tosefta verily, don't speak to me about this anymore. And it had to do with the context of Moses asking God if he would allow him, if he'd go back on that edict that he could not enter the land of Israel. So Moses is sharing with the Israelites how he appealed to God to allow him to enter the land of Israel, and God says back to him, it's enough, don't say anymore, don't talk to me about this anymore. For Rashi Piresh, and Rashi explains, Barav biser et bnei machlokato Rav lachem bnei Levi. He said to them, you're asking too much, right? V'akadosh Baruch Hu medatek et tzadikav. And when it comes to judging, God judging his righteous people, v'ne'enash b'oto midah. The fact is that when it comes to judging righteous people, God holds them by a higher standard. The fact that they're righteous means they get judged on a higher level than a regular person. Ad kan leshono, end of quote. Ulachol hamefarshim mevuar, and with regards to all the commentators, they clarify shechata, or it's clear from reading the commentators, shechata Moshe, that Moses sinned, b'ma she'amar lashon zeh, in that he used this kind of language, that he spoke this expression. V'lo beiru ma chata bazeh, but they don't bother to explain what was the sin he committed. Why was that a sin? That he said to Korach and his people, you're asking too much, right? Or you're not you're asking too much, but you're exalting yourselves. You're exalting yourselves. So I'm going to press on. And it looks to me that in fact they're going in the wrong direction, these commentators. That in actual fact, Moses never did sin. He wasn't sinning when he said this to them. Rak kimi pnei shamar rav lachem b'nei Levi, but simply because he used the expression rav lachem b'nei Levi, right? It is too much for you, O sons of Levi. The mashma'ut, that is to say, that what he was saying was, kfar yesh lachem rav kavod ugdolah. He was saying to them, you already have so much honor and greatness. That's what he was saying to them. He was telling them, you need to be satisfied. You should be satisfied that you have so much. Okay, and I'm going to have to stop here. So I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording.